Hello, my name is Rod Schaefer, and I'm going to do a quick video here on how to clone the Laravel 5.5 starter project that I created, which I created to make an easy, quick way to scaffold out a new Laravel project that requires an access control list. So, in other words, I want to have roles and permissions, and I want to be able to assign the permissions to a role. And then I want to be able to assign the role to a user. So, uh, the first thing that you would want to do is you want to bring up my GitHub page. So, right here is the address. It's just github.com, Rod Schaefer, and then L55 starter. And if you scroll down a ways on the page, you'll come to a section where I basically describe what the project is, what I'm using in the project, and then I also have the Laravel information in there. And just below the Laravel information, there's an installation section. And so, just one thing I want to point out before we get started is I develop all my web apps on a VPS, for use on a VPS, I should say, that uses Web Host Manager and cPanel, and it defaults to public HTML as the document root. So I set the project up to use that and not public. So to clone the project, you need to have Git installed on your system. And what you want to do is you want to copy this. So I'm just going to highlight it, right click on it, and say copy it. And I'm using CentOS 7 for my local development server. And so I had already opened up a terminal window, and I changed to the root folder that stores all of my web applications. So I'm just going to open up my terminal window, and I'm going to paste that command into my terminal window. And then I'm going to hit enter, and it will go out to GitHub. It'll pull the project down, and it puts it into a folder called L55 starter. Now, I had already set up an Apache vhost to use the L55starter.com folder. That's how I set it up. So I'm just going to quickly move it into that folder, which that's one thing I would like to point out is you can move it into any folder that you would like to. And I was trying to speed things up a little bit there by copying and pasting. Okay, so if I change to that folder now, and I clear my screen out, and then I do a directory listing, which is just ls space -l, and you'll see now I have the full project cloned into that folder. So if we bring back up my GitHub page, the next thing that we would want to do is we want to run composer install, and this will install all the vendor requirements. So I'm just going to clear my screen out again so you can see it easier. Put in composer install, and that will pull everything in. And so then I'm going to clear my screen out, do another directory listing, and you'll see now we have the vendor folder there. So then if we open up the GitHub page again, the next thing that we want to do is we want to make the bootstrap folder and the storage folder, we want to make them writable. So to do that, we're going to chmod the folders, which is change mode. So I'm just going to copy this first one, go back to my terminal window, and I'm going to paste that into there. And that will do the first folder, the bootstrap folder right there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that one, put in my sudo password, and then I'm just going to use my up arrow to bring up the last command that I had done, erase the bootstrap folder, and put storage there so that that one gets done as well. And then I'm going to clear my screen out. But if you notice, before I do that, if you notice, we'll look at the storage one, for example. if you look at over here at the everyone else permissions, that's what these are: read, write, and execute. And you'll notice that the center one, we didn't have the right permissions. So now if I do my directory listing, you will see now we do have the right permissions: read, write, and execute. And same thing for Bootstrap: read, write, and execute. And that is required for all Laravel apps. If those folders are not writable, it'll cause problems. So then the next thing that we want to do is we want to copy the .environment example file. So we want to create a new file called .environment in the root folder for our project. And we want to take everything that's in the .environment example, copy it, and paste it into this one. So my IDE, integrated development environment, is PHP Storm. So I'm just going to open up PHP Storm. And I'm going to open up that project. If you didn't have it here already, you simply want to go to Open, browse to the folder that holds your web applications, which is mine is var www html. You want to locate that folder. Just click on it once to highlight it and say OK. And that will open up the project, and then you'll have it in this list once you open it up for the first time. So I had obviously already done that. And so then once the project is open, you'll notice that you can switch your views here. You want to leave it on project, but you want to click this little arrow to the left of the top level folder here. That'll expand it. And here's all the files to the project. So now what we want to do is we want to come back up here to this top level folder, and we want to right click on it and say new file, and we want to create a .environment. And that opens it up in our editor pane over here. So we want to open up this .environment example. Just double click on it. And we want to take and we want to select everything that's in the file. So select all. And then put your mouse pointer over top of it, right click, and say copy that. And then paste it into our new .environment that we created. And then that gives you a basic starting point. So once we're done with that, if we bring the GitHub page back up, the next step is to run PHP artisan key generate. Otherwise, we'll have issues when we try to run it for the first time. And if you look back in our .environment file, you'll notice that there is no key here. So if we go back to our terminal window and we run PHP artisan key generate, that will create our key for us and put it in our .environment file for us. Right there it is. So then the next thing that you want to do is you want to create a database and a user. And then you want to take the connection information and put it into the .environment file under this DB section. So you want to put in the database name, the database username, and the database password that you create. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the video on pause for a second while I go ahead and put that information in. Okay, I went ahead and put in my connection information into my .environment file. And so then the next thing we want to do after you have that done is we want to migrate the database, and then we want to seed the database. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this PHP artisan migrate. And in my terminal window, I'm going to go ahead and paste that into there. Before I do though, I'm just going to clear out my screen so it makes it easier for you to see. Then I'm going to paste that command in, and I'm going to hit enter. And that is going to create all of our database tables that we need. And so then I'm going to clear the screen out again, back to my GitHub page, and I'm going to copy this PHP artisan dbc command, and I'm going to paste that into my terminal window. And that is going to seed the database with the information that we need. So if I just open up PHP my admin, that's what I use to manage my databases. and I look at the database that I'm using, you'll see now that we have the tables in there. If I click on users, there's one user in there, which is admin. The email is admin@domain.com, and the password is just secret. So then if we look at the permissions table, actually we look at the roles table first, there's one role, it's called admin. And then if we look at the permissions table, we have all the permissions that we're going to need to create new users, roles, and permissions. So I'm just going to go ahead and close that back out. Now we're almost done here, so the only other things we need to do is we need to run either npm install or yarn install. Depends on the dependency manager that you use for Node. I happen to like yarn because it's a lot faster, so I'm just going to use yarn to install my dependencies. And so I'm going to clear this out again, and if I just paste the yarn install command in there and I hit enter, that will go out. It'll take a little bit. It'll go out and it'll pull in all the Node modules that we need and compile them. Okay, so that's done. If we look back in our project in PHP Storm, we now have our Node modules folder. And so then the last thing that we need to do is we need to create a .htaccess file if needed. So that way the routes will get rewritten properly. Otherwise, you'll have errors and the application won't run. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the video on pause again for a second while I create my .htaccess file. Okay, I got my .htaccess file created. And so now if I just open up a new browser window and I paste in the address that the domain I set up for this project on my local development server, and I hit enter, that will bring up the main page, and you'll see it's very similar to just a fresh Laravel installation. And I created one additional link here that says starter, and if you click on that, that basically has the same information that I have on my GitHub page, what the project is, how to install it. And this does have the Laravel authentication scaffolding in it, so you do have the login and the register. So to bring up the admin interface, to manage the users, roles, and permissions, you simply put in /admin. And that will ask you to obviously log in, and then you just use the default email address that I had set up with it, admin@domain.com, and the password is secret. And click log in, and that will bring you up to the main admin page, the dashboard. And if you notice, there's only one menu option up here other than the logout over here that says ACL, and you can view all the users on the system. You can create a user. You can view all the roles, create a role. You can view all the permissions and create a permission. So if we were to go in and view all the permissions that got seeded into the database, and actually I'm glad that this came up, because if this issue happens to you, it's because the storage framework cache data folder cannot be written to. And that's because in the terminal, we had done some things in here that created that directory with my Linux username. And I'm using Apache web server, and it needs permissions or ownership of that directory to access it. And so the way that I'm going to fix that is I'm just going to change directory to the storage framework cache folder. And then if I clear my screen out here and I do a directory listing, you'll see that the data folder is owned by me, my Linux permissions. So the way that I'm going to fix that is I'm just going to delete this folder and everything inside of it. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use sudo rm for remove minus r for recursively, and then I'm going to put the dot forward slash to say look in the folder that I'm currently in, and I'm going to say the data folder. And then I'm going to need to put in my sudo password, of course. And that's going to totally remove that folder. So if I do a directory listing now, you'll see it's no longer there. And if we go back to our web browser window and we just refresh this page, everything will be fine at that point. And so then you'll see here's all the permissions that got seeded with the database. And these are the ones that we're going to need to create new permissions, create new roles, and then assign the roles to users. So I'm just going to do a quick example. Let's say I have a blog, for example, and I want to create an editor role. So I want to give a user permission to go in and create new articles, edit articles, and also view articles, but they can't delete articles. So the first thing I would want to do is I want to go in and I want to create those permissions. So I'm going to say create permission, and I'm going to give it the first one just view underscore article. And I'm going to go ahead and create that permission. It'll basically give me a message saying it's been created successfully. And if we just look quickly on the second page, you'll see right here is the new permission that we just created. So now we want to create two more permissions. So we're going to create another one that is edit articles. We're going to create that one, and then we're going to create one for create articles. Okay, so now we have all three new permissions created. We have view article, edit article, and create article. So now we want to create a role. So if we look at all the roles that are on there now, we only have one, which is admin. So we're going to create a new one called editor. And then we're going to assign the new permissions that we just created to that role. So they're going to be all the way at the bottom here. We want to do view article, edit article, and create article. And then we're going to say create that role, and it's going to have those three permissions. So now if we go in and we view it, you'll see that there's the permissions that we just added to that role. If we go back and look at the admin one, you'll see that it has all the permissions, other than the three that we just created because we didn't assign them to that. Now we can go in and edit this role, and we can add those permissions on. So we're going to go ahead and do that quickly. Because in the real situation, we would want our administrator to be able to do everything. So we're just going to add on those three permissions, and we're going to save it. And then that's successfully been updated. So now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to create a user that we can assign this editor role to. So if we look at all users first real quickly, you'll see that there's only that one admin user. And we're going to create a new user. And we're just going to make up a name like Mr. Editor. And email address, we're just going to make one up. editor@editor.com. And password, we're just going to make a dummy password up here. And then we're going to choose the role that we want to assign to this user, and that is editor. And we're going to say create them. And we now successfully have that user. If we view the user, it shows us, yep, they have the editor role. And so then what that allows us to do is, if we just go back to the GitHub page for this project, and we go back up to the top here, and we right click on the Speedy Laravel permissions and say open link in a new tab. And we quickly look at this. I would really suggest coming here and reading over this documentation. Now this is down quite a ways, so I'm going to try to get closer here with these links. It's pretty far down in the documentation. We can do things, for example, like with these blade directives. We can say, if the person at role is an editor, then we could say it passes that test. Oh, I'm a editor, or else I'm not an editor. So we can do things like, if they have the role of editor, then we can use that logic in our blade templates. We can also do things like @can, edit articles, and then we can show specific pieces in our blade templates to specific users. And so then I would just, like I said, I would come here and I would review this information because this is the package that I'm using. And that pretty much concludes the tutorial. And we'll see you on my next video.